this is Dr. Stephen Greer, and this is Conversations with Dr. Greer and on the World Puja Network. And I'd like to thank the folks at the World Puja Network for hosting us every 2 weeks here. And I'm really excited today having with me Raven Nabulsi, who has been a very important member of our team for about a decade and has been very involved with the CSETI-Expeditions, and is the person that many of you may have heard about has taken some of the extraordinary photographs in the last 12 months or so on these expeditions in the last year or two. And I'd like to say she's also an amazing acupuncturist and Chinese medical healer, and she lives in Orange County, California. And her husband is Todd Goldenbaum, who's been the administrator for the OrionProject.org website since its inception in 2008. So thank you, Raven, for all that you've done and for being here.
Thank you, Stephen, for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I think one of the things I'd like to sort of introduce the topic is really about how over the last few years there has been this rapid ascendancy arc of contact and in all the ways that it's happening, which I believe is showing the way to the fact that when mass consciousness begins to turn and acknowledge a reality, it builds its own positive feedback loop and becomes its own force, and momentum is built. And that's exactly what we're seeing globally with CSETI, the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence.org, CSETI.org, and also with DisclosureProject.org around the world. And I think in particular there are certain areas and manifestations of contact that are really unique, that have begun to unfold up to and including some events that happened with a mass consciousness event we just had in Arizona, in the southern Arizona desert near Rio Rico, Arizona, about 2 weeks ago. And I think that, in fact, it was 2 weeks ago tonight, that a couple of the most extraordinary photographs ever taken of transdimensional extraterrestrial vehicles kind of tearing through the fabric of space-time and emerging into space right above the group occurred. So these are soon going to be up at the CSETI, CSETI.org website, and it's really exciting what's happening. But one of the things I'd like to have, Raven, if you don't mind sharing, is sort of how you got involved and when you got involved with CSETI, and the kinds of experiences you've had that have led up to your having this connection with ETs where you've been able to have these photographs occur.
Sure. I've been involved since November of 1998, and it was my first training. We were in Sedona, and I didn't know what to expect, but I had some experiences in childhood, and a friend actually signed me up to go to the training, and I've been hooked ever since. And I would say just over time, I've been practicing the protocols that you have been teaching us about, and it was about a year ago I guess we were in the Outer Banks last year in 2009.
Yeah, in April, right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, April of 2009. I had my own personal camera, and I decided to kind of do an experiment and see what would happen if I asked the ETs to kind of work through my camera. And I don't have a expensive, 20 megapixel camera like a lot of people have, but it was just my, regular Fuji camera, and I decided to make a connection in consciousness with the ETs using the protocols, and then just ask that, if it's possible for them to, come into the photographs I was taking. And so after that, I let it go, and I didn't think about it much. And so I was just walking down the beach in broad daylight, randomly taking pictures. And when I went back and looked at them, I noticed there was a pretty materialized disc in the photograph, which I believe is on the CSETI website now. And there was a second shot I took where you can barely see it, but it had, within a minute, it had moved away at such speed that it was quite amazing. Although at the time I took the photograph, I did not see it, but it was absolutely there when I went back and put it in my computer. So that really got me going. So when we were in Rio Rico last year, I decided to, ask sort of put the same message out there. And again, I got a photograph of it looked like either dematerializing or materializing tetrahedral shaped craft that was right above our circle. And a lot of people had been sensing that and mentioning that they were feeling that sort of a shaped craft was in the area, and then it showed up in my photograph. So that was pretty exciting. And then the big one was in
the pièce de résistance.
Yes, was last year in Joshua Tree in November. Our group was out there, and there were events leading up to this, which I would like to mention that on the day that the photograph was taken, which I believe was November 17th last year, I was in the house we were staying in with a couple other ladies, and we were kind of talking quietly that morning as there were still other people in the house sleeping, and there was a very distinct male voice that was whispering in the midst of us, and we all kind of looked at each other, and it was, obviously there was no one there, so that kind of started the day off. And so later on that night
if I can mention, at the same
Yes.
time you had that experience, I was upstairs meditating, and
That's right.
I was in this very deep, remote view, sort of hypnagogic state of meditative state of just awakening and going into meditation. And an extraterrestrial life form, clear as a bell, said to me, the Joshua trees transmit star energy. It was the strangest thing, but it was with this very, the tone of the voice was exactly, I'll do it again, the Joshua trees transmit star energy. It was very matter of fact and very sweet, and it was talking about how the Joshua trees in Joshua Tree National Park somehow absorb some sort of energy spectrum from the stars and then transmit like a radio antennas. And if you look at them, they look like little antennae that are on the Joshua tree. And
right.
It's just the strangest thing, but that happened at precisely the same instant that that you and Linda Willis, which many people have heard on this show, and another person who was staying there heard Dr. Bravo, I believe it was with you.
Yes, it was Jan.
Yeah, Jan Bravo, and heard this sort of whispering voice. So I think it's very important, and it was preceded by about, a couple of days earlier, we were in your home county of Orange County, California,
That's
when
correct.
we were in a circle up in this canyon area. I forget the name of it. And we had our group, and it was just a weekend training event, a day-long event, actually. And we had set up, and right in front of where we were sitting, there was clearly an extraterrestrial voice that broke in almost like a radio transmission about 3 feet in front of us, and we recorded it. It's actually, we have the recording of a couple of the syllables. It was actually 4 or 5 syllables, but for some reason the audio recorder only picked up a couple of them. And so there was this kind of ascending level of intimate right there ET beings. We're not talking a light in the sky. We're not talking, but right amongst us. And right after that happened, there was this object that flashed in the middle of the circle. And
That's right.
I remember there was a woman there named Christine, and near her foot, and then it moved across the circle and flashed in front of someone else, and everyone looking in that area saw it. It was fully manifest light of this light being or object that flashed in the circle. And that was in Orange County a day or two before we started the CSETI expedition up in Joshua Tree National Park, where these events happen in the house. So I just want to sort of like set the stage for what Raven's about to share now. Yeah.
So then, so later that evening, we went out to our field site, and that's the night we had seen that enormous, burst of light in the sky, and we were kind of down this trail that's nearby to our circle where we set up, and that itself was astounding. If nothing else had happened, that was already amazing. That just, it lit up the sky it looked like miles across, this enormous burst of light. And as we were coming back down the trail, I believe you, Steve, had seen like an orb following us down, coming back down the trail.
Correct.
And then
it was about the size of my fist, and it was a soft white orb that and Linda saw it as well, that blipped in and out. It was astonishing.
Mm-hmm. And then we were sort of at the edge of the trailhead, and there were clearly some voices that were heard that were not human, but it sounded like there could have been possibly like 3 or 4 beings of some sort that were making some sort of noise or like a language very close by outside of the edge of our circle. And at that point, I went back to my seat because I knew we were going to start together again, and a lot of people had heard those voices as well. There were at least 50 people there that night, and I'd say at least half the people heard these voices. They were very distinct, but definitely not some people from our group.
Right. In fact, I looked over with my I have these almost 4th generation night scopes, and looked over at exactly the spot where we heard this group of people of some type speaking, and it was just empty space. But everyone heard them. Not everyone, but a lot of people in the group heard it. So there was no question that it was something very anomalous out there in the middle of Joshua Tree National Park.
Right. So I went back to my seat, and Linda Willits was sitting next to me. She had also come back. So we were kind of the only people back in the circle at that point, and we would have been facing pretty much due east. And so I again decided before we all gathered, I would go through my little photographic experiment and just, we were already in this sort of, state of expanded consciousness. I would ask the ETs if, they could possibly appear in my photographs. That would be great. So I remember I took about 10 photographs, and keep in mind that there were no flashlights on because we have a strict no light policy out in the field, so we don't ruin our night vision. So there weren't any flashlights or any light sources nearby. And I did not use a flash when I was taking my photographs, but I just had the camera on like a 4-second exposure setting. So I was just taking pictures, and all of them were pitch black because there was, nothing there. And then the last photo I took, I realized that there was some sort of light in the picture, but I thought I'll just look at it later on when we get back because we were getting ready to get started again. So later that night, when I actually put the photos into my computer, that's when I saw there was an actual image of a being floating above one of the chairs across the circle from me. And that, I went nuts because that was just amazing. And there was nobody there, and you could clearly see that the chairs in the photograph were crystal clear, and there was this image of a little male figure, maybe roughly about 4 feet tall, just kind of floating in space above this chair. And I went back there about a month later to photograph the same spot just to make sure, because we never see those the field site during the day. So I went back and took photos to make sure there was nothing back there, and I had people simulate what it might look like in the rare chance that somebody was standing there with the flashlight, but there was nobody there. I knew that much, but just to kind of sway anybody's doubts, I wanted to make sure I had enough information to present just to make, so people would realize that there wasn't anything there that could have possibly made that. But there was a very bright light source, which we believe was the orb that Steve saw, creating this almost like a radiating light so this being could show up.
Exactly. Right. And in fact, it's I've described it as, and you can go to